All right, everybody, guess what? It's me, Cyber Warrior. This is CyberWarriorStudios, and we are back once again for Security Happy Hour. And I'm loving it. I gotta say, look, some big things are coming along. I've already shared it on Twitter and all these other places. We do have a lot of changes coming about. We're gonna start doing a different topic every week to get people that specialize in those fields. We're gonna start getting groups on like VetSec, Blacks in Cyber, TechSec Chicks, and a bunch of others. All right, that's the plan, and I'm gonna make it happen. But for today, we're gonna keep going with what I normally do. And today I got Brad Proctor with me, and it is one of those things where he's been around for a while. Not necessarily in security, but he's been around for a while in IT. So I'm gonna let Brad give his spiel. Let us know, man, how you kind of got to where you're at now, and really what you're trying to do with your career and how much you're trying to advance.
I think probably the best place to start is uh, what I wanted to be in high school. So that, they always ask you, what do you want to be? And I wanted to be a meteorologist. That was what I wanted to do. And so when they put you in those high school classes, vocational classes, they put me in these computer classes, and that was kind of the end of that story as far as being a meteorologist. Fell in love with it, and ended up graduating high school with an A plus and an MCP. Right out of high school. Went to a community college. School wasn't really my thing, but I did it just to say I did it, and did that. And I actually started my first job while I was still finishing the degree. And I worked for a newspaper in my hometown. I actually got that job because they did two articles on me. One was because it was I had a blog, and in 2003, 2004, that was fairly new. And then in 2005, they wrote another article on me because at the time I had a podcast. And in 2005, podcasting, you literally had to write the RSS feed yourself. So all this newfangled stuff and everyone doing podcasts, you have it so easy. And then from there, I worked for a publishing company. I actually supported mostly Macs at the time. So I kind of started as a Mac admin. And at that time, Macs weren't really popular. And so left there, moved to where their main headquarters was, in a town not too far away. And after that, in 2007, which I think is really relevant to kind of what how I connected with you and several other people in the InfoSec community, is once Twitter came on the scene, and that was in 2007 when I first joined it. So I've been on Twitter for quite a while. I saw kind of what it was going to do, and this was before you had social media influencers. So you just had IT people that actually kind of knew how to use the technology. And so by default, we were thrown into, hey, figure out this social marketing stuff. And so I took this really weird route that kind of looks funny if you look at it on a resume. And here I am doing mostly IT work. And then all of a sudden, I'm a director of social marketing for a toy company. It was weird, but I learned a lot doing that. One, I got to go to Toy Fair. My little claim to fame is that I helped organize a tweet up at Toy Fair, which was kind of cool. And so the reason I bring that up is that early on, Twitter was a lot of Mac people, was a lot of what we would at the time called Web 2.0 people. And then, the community, a lot of the features you see on Twitter, your @ replies, your hashtags, those were community features. They didn't exist. Those are things that the community just started doing and Twitter adopted. And so after that, I decided to get back in tech. And that was mainly because Apple had approached a local repair shop to do Apple repairs. And when Apple approaches you, you just kind of say, yeah, sure, let's do what you want. And my license plate at the time was Mac Geek, and this guy kind of chased me down because he didn't know how to work on Macs. And so that's kind of how I ended up back in the tech scene. From there, helped him kind of start an MSP, and was kind of my part of my job mainly was getting kind of all the pieces together, partners, what we use to actually deliver services. And then from there, now where I'm at is I work for a DoD contractor, and I deal with a lot of compliance issues, particularly, and then I'll probably stop myself, and if any other DoD folks out there, you probably know that we live in a sea of acronyms. So if I say acronyms and you don't know what it is, look it up or ask. So I deal with a lot of DFAR 7012.
I'm here for you for your acronyms, man.
Yeah. And then soon to be CMMC type work. So kind of have a dual role where I'm the IT manager, but I also have to deal with compliance issues as well. So,
man, that's a long path. It is, and I really like the fact that you did a little bit of everything, and you kind of did. I mean, granted, you didn't intend on getting into IT when you were in school; it just sort of happened. And let's be honest, who wouldn't want to be a meteorologist where you could be wrong over half the time and still collect a nice paycheck? But the fact that you were able to get out of there with an A+ and your MCP, make a career out of IT, get into the social marketing side of things, which, I still want to know who coined the term hashtag, because it's a freaking pound sign, and actually it has a real legitimate name that I can never remember. But whoever started saying hashtag this is, I really want to know who changed that terminology. But yeah, so to see your growth in what you're doing now, and let's be honest, risk and compliance, governance, GRC and as a whole is a huge field that I don't think we have enough people in that really either know about it, or if they know about it, they don't care. So I think that's an industry where we could see potentially a lot of growth and a lot of people make a lot of headway. So knowing that's where you came from, and the fact that you're doing a lot of stuff for the DoD now in CMMC and compliance is amazing. What is the hardest part right now, you think, about what you're doing? And we're going to turn this, for what you're doing now, we're going to run this into what we were talking about earlier before the show. So what do you think the hardest part about what you're doing now is?
I would say, the hardest part is going to be, at least currently for me, you look at it from a compliance standpoint. And I think any DoD contractor would say, right now we don't know which way's up. We have these standards we're supposed to meet, and then CMMC, no one has all the answers yet. And so you're just in this pattern where the government keeps making changes, which is constant, but we just don't know yet. And it's, they're starting to use language in these proposals or in these RFPs. And you're like, okay, well, you want us to be assessed, or you want us to have a certification, yet the accreditation body is not even, fully ready to go. And so there's just so many things out there that are unknowns, and there's so many gray areas for some of these controls that it's hard to know at the moment, where are we going with this?
Yeah, and do you think that executive order that Biden signed is going to help bring in more fluency to the controls and what is going on, especially within the government? Because with all the red tape, all the bureaucracy, you have to have these certifications just to be able to do this job, when, let's be honest, some of the certifications no person in their right mind can pay for. It requires the government or a company to pay for. So, do you see it going in a way that maybe this executive order will help, or is it still going to be an issue where they don't know heads from tails, and you're going to have so much red tape, bureaucracy, and all this other nonsense that, are we ever going to get to a point, do you, in your opinion, it's been 2.5 years, so you've had a little bit of time there, where you see this kind of switching to where we know what we're doing now?
I think the biggest thing is, and I'll kind of explain this to people that don't understand how this works. So you have the whole idea behind a lot of these regulations is that you're trying to protect what the government considers CUI, which is controlled unclassified information. And so the whole idea behind these programs is that back in 2017, there was the DFARS 7012, which stands for Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation. So if you do work for the federal government and you have this clause in your contract, you have to meet all 110 controls in the NIST 800-171 special publication. So there's some other caveats to that, but that's the root of it. So the executive order you're talking about, the Biden signed, was basically a lot of it was around, hey, we're going to do these certain things. Zero trust was mentioned a bunch of times. NIST 800-171 has a very great deal of detail that's least privilege. So at that point, you're right there at zero trust. You're right there at what Biden's talking about. The issue, and which is why CMMC came about, is that the DFARS clauses and the NIST was all self-attestation. And so a contractor can say, yeah, we're compliant. We have that. They sign the contract. Contractually, they're obligated. If they were ever had an assessment, they're probably not going to be where they need to be. And so the federal government said, look, we're done with this. We got to have something in place to really make sure these contractors are doing what they say they're doing, because they're not. And that within itself is why you see the executive order, why you see certain things come into play. So yeah, I think it will help if you make it a requirement and it starts to be a reason that someone cannot even win a contract.
That's interesting. So with these controls, and this is where I'm going to make my segue, with these controls, with the things that the government's doing and what you see there, how much have you worked in private sector to know whether or not something like this, if you're not dealing with government contracts and such like that, with the controls that currently are in place, especially with supply chain? Because once again, we are seeing a supply chain attack. And is it going to be possible to mitigate these things and mitigate these attacks with this executive order that was signed shortly after SolarWinds? You know, after he took office and SolarWinds had happened. I mean, that was kind of what spawned this, was SolarWinds. But now we have this executive order, and now we have another supply chain attack that comes up in the same year. So is this going to help? Is these supply chain attacks and REvil and things like that's hitting an MSP at this point? I know it's not necessarily all the U.S., but doesn't mean it's not going to hit the U.S. Do we think this is going to help?
There's nothing's 100% secure. So is the executive order gonna solve this? Not 100% no. And I actually had a conversation today about that with Harley, or Infinite Logins. And the end of our conversation, it was basically the really only answer is layering and monitoring. I mean, you got to layer the defense and monitor and see, make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do, and are you catching it before it even gets to that point?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And and I don't know if how many of the shows you've watched, but that's been a topic of conversation before, where the only truly secure computer is unplugged, turned off, 6 feet underground, and a lead-lined concrete box. Like there's no such thing as 100% secure. Companies like people to tell them it is, but there's no such thing. There's always going to be a backdoor. There's always going to be some vulnerability that gets found. It's just the way it is, and it's just the way it works. So with this thing with REvil, I mean, we had already seen a supply chain attack with SolarWinds, which we still don't know the extent of. We still don't know how far reaching that is. I have not seen anything that shows how this came about, because it came, according to what I read, it is a payload that came down and is put into this VSP update folder, essentially, or some folder that this VSP software, uses, and then executes from there. So how did it get there in the first place? Was there a vulnerability in the system that they just said, hey, it's here? Or was it they put it on this, software company's update server, and it got pushed out from there. And that's
Yeah.
where this, the question is, because we can monitor, we can layer our defenses, and you can even go as far back as, the print nightmare vulnerability that's out right now. All right, turn off your print spooler for your major servers, but with this, with Revil doing this, how far reaching is this going to get, and how further are we going to see these supply chain attacks where they're hitting these major companies, your MSSPs, your MSPs, your SolarWinds types of ventures and things like that, and companies where they're going to say, screw the businesses, the little guy, we're going to hit these major supply chains that push out updates, and we're just going to drop updates in.
It's not there's no, I don't want to say there's an easy answer. I mean, there's not. And I think it's going to take, a lot of it's going to take just talking about it, thinking it through from different people, in different areas of expertise to figure this out. I don't think anyone has the 100% answer. And if they tell you they do, they're lying.
Right. So do we start putting more pressure on these supply chains to validate and do continuous monitoring on their end?
It has to go up the chain. Just like,
right.
For instance, so CMMC, I think, is actually a great example for this, because the other requirement, and this is where it's going to really hit small businesses in the defense industrial base in the face, is that if you're a prime contractor, you will be required to have a certain level based on what they say in the RFP. Then you are required as a prime to flow down that requirement to your subcontractors. And so let's say I'm a prime contractor and they say that, okay, this contract, you have to be level 3. It's up to the prime to determine, are we going to be handing off this data to our supply chain, our subcontractors below us, and then we have to determine what level they have to be. But at the end of the day, everybody has to have a score. If you do, even if you're a sub, you have to have a score. So even if it's a 1 or 2 man shop that might be moving dirt, they're going to have a score. It doesn't matter if it's 1, but they have to have it. And so where I say that's a perfect example is that's attacking that supply chain in a certain way. Is it perfect? No, but it's something.
Yeah, and I think to me, that's the biggest thing, is I don't know if we're taking the right steps. I don't know if we're taking the wrong steps. I don't know if we're taking too short of a stride. I really don't know, because I always feel like we're behind the 8 ball, both in critical infrastructure and even private sector. Granted, private sector and your private corporations away from the government tend to do a little bit better at times, just because they don't have so much red tape that they have to go through to get things approved through the chain and things like that. But I really wonder if how can we stop getting so far behind? Revil is just the second supply chain attack in the past 2 years we have seen that. Now this is hitting private corporations. We haven't seen it hit government sector yet, mainly because I don't believe they use MSPs, or at least shouldn't. They have enough money to put on staff, but now we're seeing this, and it's going to get bigger, and it's going to get worse. This isn't the first time I've heard of an MSP being hit by ransomware either. I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago. There were some major MSPs that got hit, and it literally crushed their clientele. It got all the way through the system. So,
and it hits the state and local governments too. Local governments, I believe, in Texas. So
yeah. So we already know MSPs and MSSPs are going to be a target, but now we're looking even further up the chain at what is supplying their software for monitoring, for securing networks, for whatever it is they're doing for a company. There used to be testing that was involved when it came to third parties, but it was only on the initial purchase. Only. Updates and upgrades are trusted from that point on. unless it's hardware. Then, of course, it goes through a testing phase again. But software, yeah, they test it, but if it doesn't call out immediately, if it's a silent dropper, they're not going to know.
And then you hit where if it's cloud infrastructure, you might just be dealing with an agent, but that agent's getting commands and pulling stuff down from a cloud infrastructure that you don't have that control of.
Right. So I don't know, man. I'm kicking myself because I have always tried to figure out the best way that as a community we can solve these problems. We have some very, very intelligent people that have been black hats, if you want to call them that have been, programmers and coders and secure coders and CI/CD and all these pipelines, all these regulations, everything, all the technologies, round the clock. Yet somehow, and for some reason within the community, we still find a way to hold ourselves back from being able to get ahead. And I don't understand it. I have yet to understand it. On why, with the bright minds we have, is it the regulation? Is it the legality of it? What is causing us to be behind all the time and not be able to put something in effect, or a policy or regulation or whatever? Is it the freedom that we're supposed to be giving companies? Because let's be honest, that's the country we live in, and you should have the freedom to do a lot of the things you want to do. But is that the case, or is it not wanting to bankrupt companies because if they don't do X, Y, and Z, they're going to get fined, $500,000 every day they're not doing it? Where can we find this happy medium that we finally start to catch up?
I think it's a delicate balance, and it's not easy. It's kind of like a catch-22, but these big ransomware attacks happening is actually for defending it and being able to get funds is actually a good thing. I know it sounds terrible because it brings awareness to the problem that the community's been yelling about. I mean, this is not new. It's not like this is something new that just popped up overnight. Ransomware has been around for a while. Now you're looking at bigger targets, a little more sophisticated than it was. I wouldn't say it's super sophisticated across the board. And then you have the whole idea of ransomware as a service. I mean, that entire idea is, actually genius if you really think about it. It's not that I wouldn't say it's, no one should do it, but the whole concept is a great idea from that standpoint.
And so with that, and I pose this to anybody in the chat as well. Do we have any idea yet how they got into VSA or VAS? I forget what the company's called, or the software.
Kaseya,
yeah.
Kaseya VSA.
Yeah. Does anybody have any clue how they got in to drop this into their folders? Because I'm really curious to see if us as a industry, SolarWinds was hit in their CI/CD pipeline essentially, because it was code that was put on, if I'm not mistaken, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was, they got in through a weak password, put code into their pipeline that wasn't checked before release, and then it got released into the public. Again, I could be wrong. I'm not all knowing. It's just what I'm understanding from what I've read, and I could be reading it wrong. But I'm curious to see how they got into this, because if this was another true supply chain attack where they hit Visaya, hit the company, and then that company distributed the malware, we're supposed to be security professionals. We're delivering software for monitoring and all this other stuff, yet we can't do what's required to make sure this doesn't happen?
So actually, Huntress Labs has been doing a great job of kind of updating on this. And one of their latest updates that they discussed, of course, it's hard for them to pinpoint it yet, but it looked like that the auto emailed from the security notifications from within the software suggested that a particular SQL user performed the action. because there's actually they locked out admin access to the platform and then perform the task. And so, that's the only thing we can kind of look at is, was it a supply chain attack, or they somehow figure out some vulnerability that was not there before?
Or was it an insider threat?
Yeah. So there's a lot of, the only thing that would be is it's been a mix. I don't know exactly, but I think it's been a mix of on-prem installs and cloud. So it's hard to say insider or not, but
that's the thing is I don't know yet. I more investigation is going to need to be done, of course, on their end to see exactly how everything went down and how everything transpired. But I am truly curious at if this was or wasn't an insider threat. Just knowing what we know so far, it seems like it's possible, and it has more of a possibility than anything else. But again, it could have been some other weakness that they just didn't know about, or they didn't see, or they just said, "Oh, we'll accept the risk." Unfortunately, in business, you have to accept risk sometimes. But a company like this with a SQL database, I think there's risks that you just should not be accepting, especially if it gives someone admin access to your database. So I worry sometimes. I do.
Yeah.
About the companies that are providing services but aren't securing their own shit.
Yeah. And I mean, the MSP world, I mean, they all use RMMs. They all use software just like this. So, yeah, it's this company today, but is it ConnectWise? Is it, some other company out there that creates an RMM? There's so many possibilities out there that, yeah, you might be happy that, hey, we don't use Kaseya, but tomorrow it could be somebody else. So yeah,
but it just goes to show. Look, one of the things, and I will say this, and again, you want to figure out who, if you know my real name and know who I work for, all right, cool. But one of the things I am very proud of to say with the company I work for is we do not support something or tell a client to use something unless we use it ourselves or have done the due diligence to make sure it is what they say they are and they're as secure as they can be for what they do. Now, that's not to say anybody's perfect, but before we try anything, or especially, anything open source or any scripts or any code or anything like that, we validate it first. If we're going to say, hey, you want to use Azure and you want to use all this other stuff, we're using it too as a way to say, how can we tell someone to use something that we haven't used ourselves or tried ourselves, right? So it's in that same vein, if you're a security company preaching security, or you're an IT company that's, hey, we're monitoring everything, right? We're a monitoring company and we're going to give you this software to monitor other companies. Can't you monitor your own shit?
Yeah. And I think it really comes down to the MSP industry in general. Is that a lot of them, and it's not all of them, there's some great MSPs out there, but a lot of them are just, kind of fly by night, so to speak. Is, hey, we could buy this RMM, we can go charge these clients this money, RMM's going to do everything for us, and we're good to go. And they don't really care. I mean, they're just there to get some money and be done. And that doesn't.
But that's the crutch of the problem, right?
Yeah.
This country, let's be honest, I will not speak for every other country out there. I will speak for the country that I live in. I live in the U.S. And here in the U.S., it's all about the dollar. And so if I can make a quick buck, I'm going to make a quick buck. And that's the way a lot of like you said, that's how some of these, small MSPs and MSSPs are doing it. They're like, oh, I could find this software that'll monitor this for me, and then I can just check in every once in a while, make sure it's all good. Okay, cool. I'll charge $10,000 a month to do this for you, without actually knowing what they're doing.
Yeah, and I don't know where that's going to go. So I'm in Louisiana, Louisiana was actually one of the first states, which is odd to hear those two things in the same sentence, to have an actual where MSPs have to register with the state. That's all they have to do at the moment. No one really knows kind of what they're going to go from there. The idea is that, there may be something where if they do certain work for a government entity that they have to do something else. No one really knows where they're going with it. But, the MSP industry is just you can kind of do whatever you want to. Someone could show up, and if you somewhat trust them, if they have a good sales pitch and you don't really do your due diligence as a business. And I mean, think about it, a small business is not going to know what questions to ask.
But again, I put that blame on, to me, it's like everything goes up and down a chain, right?
Yeah.
You can't hold just one sole entity responsible. I'd love to. Like, we always joke about it. Oh, it's always DNS. But but at the end of the day, when it comes to things like this, are the companies that are being hit after the fact, that that third order of effect of what's going on, or second order, or whatever the case may be, are they not to blame? I wouldn't say that. They weren't doing their due diligence either. They didn't put things into effect that were supposed to help monitor this thing and kind of stop it before it spread too wide. The MSPs definitely weren't doing their due diligence to make sure, hey, we're pushing out software that we shouldn't be. And then of course you get to the supply chain, and they weren't doing their due diligence to make sure, hey, we aren't distributing shit we shouldn't be. Now, granted, I do think the message they sent out of, hey, shut down these agents, was actually relatively quickly from when they found out about it. So I don't blame them for that. And I'm sure they're going to lose money for having people shut down all these agents. So the fact that they're willing to take that hit because of their, what happened, kudos, I guess. The fact that it happened in the first place, not really happy about. But it's how they respond, because nobody's perfect. Like we say, nobody is perfect. It is impossible. And this is why I want to know how it really came about, because was it something simple that could have been stopped initially, or is this something more profound and more sophisticated than we're really giving it credit for? And that's where the question comes in, because if it was something simple, then we got bigger problems on our hands, where we're letting these software companies kind of make their pitch, and you've got CEOs and CISOs and CIOs and security directors and whoever the hell else that's listening to it get all freaking smiley and happy about blinky lights again. And that's the problem. And that's where you get the FUD sales. And I despise FUD. I do. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I despise it. But that's how a lot of sales pitches go. Hey, we guarantee you will never be hit by ransomware. You can guarantee that? And then you get hit, and it ain't like they're going to pay you for getting hit. Like, come on. So it's a touchy subject. It really is, because you got to market it somehow. But why is it always fun? And why is it these companies that are getting hit by Revel, that are getting hit by, SolarWinds attack, SolarWinds itself being breached? You're pitching all these things, but you're not following up on a lot of the simple stuff that's been done, that should be done within your own organization. And that's the sad part. Yes, we can hold other people accountable for what has happened in their organization, but we should also be holding security companies, monitoring companies, software companies to a higher standard. Because if you are selling something that is supposed to help my network, you should be held to a higher standard than the organization that's outright admitting, I cannot do this on my own.
Yeah. I mean, by buying an RMM, that's exactly what they're saying. They're saying, and I feel for these MSPs, because a lot of time with these RMMs, this is how they help their clients. And so here they are, completely shut off from their client, who may potentially have just been ransomwared, and they don't even have the tools they normally would have to help them. And so it's not pretty. I mean, of course, right here before a holiday weekend, of course, they planned that perfect.
That was the other thing. So, and Devil Ray just put it in the chat. He posted it in my Discord channel, and I actually sent it to my work earlier today. The bleeping computer article on it, that these attacks, especially the major attacks that you see, take place late on a weekend when you're low staffed. And this took place July 4th weekend. These people aren't stupid. We like to think they are. We like to, claim, oh, it's this, that, and the third. These attackers, the malicious people are not stupid. Now understand, in this career field, it is very hard to make what a lot of these people can make in a month. Unless you work your way up. Now, granted, you risk going to jail when you do what they do, and that's not a risk I'm willing to take. I don't know about you, but I sure as hell am not.
Nope, not taking that risk.
But when you look at it, these malicious people don't require certifications, don't require degrees, don't require anything else other than the right amount of funds to get the software they need, if they haven't written them themselves, to do the job. Whereas in this career field, you need degrees, certifications, experience, and that's for a junior role. For a mid and senior level role, it gets even worse. Now you need like 10 degrees and 20 certifications and 30 years experience. But I know I'm exaggerating, but the point stands where it is easier to look at this field and be malicious and say, I'll drop Revel and make, let's be honest, I think they asked for like $5 million or something like that off of what I saw. So if even one person says yes and pays it, they ain't never got to do it again.
Yeah.
Granted, they might, but they don't have to unless they're greedy. No.
Yeah, and of course they get their Revel gets their affiliate money, so they're not getting the full amount. But hey, I mean, percentage of 5 million, I'd take it.
Right? Like, so it's one of those things. You look at it. I think this is the highest ransom I've seen. What I do find even more interesting, and it's something me and a few of my buddies talked about 2 or 3 years ago. They asked for XMR, which is Monero, which is a more private cryptocurrency. They operate on a different blockchain and things like that, in a different way they do their algorithms. But they didn't ask for Bitcoin. They didn't ask for Ethereum. They asked for Monero. So it lends to believe they may be a little more intelligent than your average ransomware person, because at worst they don't get any money, but I highly doubt they paid much for it. And it's usually one of those, hey, I mean, if you look at the market, they probably had 30 grand, 40 grand up front, and hey, if you get any money, you owe us 30%. Okay. But I don't know. It's one of those things, man. It's the market for it, the ransomware as a service, as you said, and just what these malicious attackers are doing it's disheartening, because we put so much red tape, bureaucracy, and look at the government itself. To work within the government, even as a contractor, you need to have a security clearance to do a lot of the cybersecurity work. Okay, so not only are you putting education and certification and experience requirements, now there has to be a clearance involved, which, unless you're with the right contracting company, they're not going to pay for. So you're making it even harder to defend networks that you say need defended.
Yeah, I mean, there's DoD contracting. There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of it, and it's one of those things. The thing is, though, is that if you look at, let's take the pipeline, for instance, it's a private company. So there's it's a critical infrastructure. So the only way to really force them to do anything is regulations. I mean, unless that's really the only way to do it. And so unless you start looking at, monetary portion of it, but they're the only pipeline there. Yeah, if they were shut down, that's going to be a monetary hit. But the only way to force it and to not make it, from the top down is a regulation. And I don't like saying that, but that's the only way to really force it from a federal standpoint.
Look, I'm not against regulations. I'm not against policies. I'm not against procedures. I think implemented in the right way, they do a lot of good things. I'm against the way we are holding accountable companies, the way we are holding accountable our government, and the way they are securing the networks and critical infrastructure. NERC, SIP, Unclass, NIPRNet, SIPRNet. I can go through a slew of different acronyms for unclassified and classified networks. They are not secure the way they should be because of the bureaucracy behind it. And I'm not saying the network engineers and the ones that work on the firewalls and policy aren't. I'm saying to get into being an analyst, to get into being a red teamer for the government and do all these other things requires you to have, give up your firstborn and a DNA sample and a follicle of hair and, sell your soul to the government. Like, understand that there are some very intelligent people out there that don't have degrees, don't have certifications, and probably will never pass a background check or a drug test. But I guarantee you they can secure your systems better than 90% of the people out there. But let's not hire them. Let's not give them jobs because they don't, live up to our standards.
Exactly. And you hit the nail on the head earlier with that. And the thing you see is that, they're learning as they're going. The attacker is, oh, this didn't work, let's try something else. But yet we're expected to come into a position knowing everything when that's not reality. And yeah, there's going to be training. Yeah, there's going to be on the job, but there's that, when you have that barrier of, hey, you have to pass this mark, this mark, this mark, this mark. When the attacker is just showing up, computer, good to go.
And the sad part about that is the trainings, the certifications that used to mean something. They meant something because it meant, even with test dumps and things like that out there, the baseline knowledge still meant something. Tests changed so frequently that test dumps were basically pointless. I mean, you can get lucky with some, but for the most part, the question pool was so large that it was pointless. You had to have the underlying knowledge. You had to understand concepts and be able to learn and grow and continue building your knowledge base. When the DoD, when the government put in place 8570, which was the regulation that stated in order to work in certain fields within the government, you had to have a Sec Plus or an A Plus or a Net Plus or whatever other certification they threw out there. Now these boot camps came out that started teaching just the test. So now these certifications became watered down. And I will tell you from firsthand experience that the vouchers that some of these places got from these boot camps gave you a certain test so that the boot camp guaranteed you would pass, because if you knew what they taught you, you had to test for that testing material. And if you got a different voucher, you got a different test. So it was rigged so that as long as you paid attention or answered their questions or whatever, you would pass. Even with a 75, whatever, you'd still get that certification. So it watered down the industry. And it made those certifications pointless because the people that really deserved them and earned them, you couldn't rely on that knowledge anymore. Because you went from a certification that maybe 2,000 people a year might pass, to now you've got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people passing a year due to these boot camps that teach just the test. And it's watered down the industry. And now the certifications that matter that you have to have firsthand knowledge, you have to be able to do the job, and all these other things are so goddamn expensive that that's what companies are asking for, but no normal fucking person can afford it in
Yeah.
today's society
Yeah.
unless you're making over $200,000 a year. Which at that point, what the fuck does a certification matter to you, anyways?
Yeah. It's yeah, I mean, certifications are great, but that caveat. And one thing, so when I was at previous employer, I did a lot of hiring of technicians, and of course, some of them would list out their certifications and all these details, or they have a 4-year degree in certain things. The ones now, when I'm talking technicians, is like your break fix. Hey, computer's broken, we're gonna be taking it apart. The ones that were really good at it was the people that taught themselves, because they took the time to see something broken and knew logically how to break it down and solve that problem. So really, a lot of what we do on a daily basis, yeah, the knowledge is there, but we're solving problems. We're discovering things, solving the problem, figuring out what it is. So it comes back to critical thinking and logical thinking, and that is something that we, at least my generation, was not really taught in school. Like, here's the book, learn the book,
It's
think.
it,
Yeah.
it's sad. You're not wrong. I've told the story before. I started fixing computers when I was 7 years old with my dad, and I broke my first computer. It was a Packard Bell, and I think it had a 5 gig hard drive in it. Maybe, if that. Might have been a 5 meg. I don't fucking know. It was DOS 3.1, I believe, or DOS whatever version. I played Commander Keen and Wolfenstein 3D on it. We went to go put a 20 meg or 20 gig hard drive in it, and it partitioned a bitch into 4 partitions. And me and my dad were like, "What the fuck?
What happened?
What do you mean I got 4 partitions here?" I said, "Just partition this drive." Call my buddy, find out that you had to have the version of the operating system at the time only recognized so much storage space, so it did it on its own. It gave you 4 different partitions. From that point on, because of the way it broke and the fact that I never wanted to make my dad mad again for spending that much money on a computer and having to fix it, I learned how to fix computers, and I loved it. And I've always loved computers. From that young, I've always loved computers. Mind you, I'm 34 years old and grew up around these things. And I came up with 56K modems, and actually 28.8K, I think it was the modem before that. And downloading a picture and hoping your sister or your parents didn't pick up the phone and kick you offline as you were downloading something, like AOL punters.
or
All
call
of these
waiting kick you
things
off.
I came up around. And the certification industry to me initially was, I can prove my knowledge. I had every Microsoft certification out there for Office to become Microsoft Office Master Certified in high school. Every single one. And I took pride in that. As time has gone on, and I've looked at the industry and what jobs have done to the certification industry, I am very quickly losing faith in the certification industry. Mind you, you're talking to someone that has spent his life trying to prove to himself that he knows what he knows by getting SAN certs, by getting the OSCP, by getting a CISP. I have the certifications. But now, even though you're supposed to be proud for having them, I look at what jobs have done, what these things have done, and I wonder why. Because it's watered down. Anything that is watered down is that you've got the job market out there saying for a junior level pen tester, they want you to have a CISP or an OSCP. Who in their right mind going for a junior role that you're going to pay 60 grand a year to can afford a goddamn OSCP?
I mean, no. I mean, they're not going to do it. I mean, and it's unrealistic. And it goes back to the point you made earlier. I mean, we're sitting here setting these unrealistic expectations for these entry level people that are probably brilliant, and we are not using the talent we have in this country. And we'll use the U.S. as an example. I mean, because that's where we are. We're not using the talent, and then the talent that is the attacker, they don't have to have any of this. And so it's crazy. And it's just the industry kind of has to, I feel like it has to wake up. And I feel like there's movement in that direction, but not everywhere. There's some that get it and there's some that don't.
Could you
But I think
imagine? Could you imagine being an attacker and going to be like, I'm gonna go do this, and your buddy going, "Do you have an OSCP? You're not allowed. You can't do
you
that."
can't, or Revel saying, okay, you can't be an affiliate unless you have these credentials. No, they don't care. They just want their cut of the money.
Right? Like, could you imagine that concept? Now, like you said, there are companies making strides, and either really looking hard at the requirements. You know, the security director or the hiring manager or somebody has more of a say in who's being hired, but it's still not where it needs to be. There's still strides we need to take. And again, I had InfoSec Keytron Evans, one of my mentors. Me and him had this conversation last year, I believe it was, maybe the year before, about the CISP and it being required for so many jobs these days. And I said it doesn't make sense for a technician to have a CISP.
Yeah,
I told him that. His response was valid. I couldn't argue because it was a valid point. At a certain level, you're going to be required to talk to CISOs, to security directors, to people that care about the business. That CISP for certain areas tells companies you can talk business, policy, regulation, everything. Whereas if you don't have it, you need to have some other proof that you can do those things before you can fit that role. So I understand. I don't think it should be a requirement. I think it should be recommended or preferred, but it should not hold you back from getting the interview, because in the interview, they can see whether or not you can speak to a higher level, because you can articulate and you can lower down the way you are wording things to a level that a business would understand. You could put it in financial terms, whatever the case may be. So, do I necessarily think it should be required? Never. I don't think any certification should be required. I don't think any degree should ever be required. I think it should be preferred, or hey, if you have these things, we're going to ask you questions about them. We're going to ask you things that you would have learned by getting them. So if you have it, you best be damn sure you did not go through a test dump just to get some fucking answers.
Yeah, and it's really that HR filter is really what it's become, and it's an easy way to filter out resumes. And I get it from the abundance of resumes coming in, but at the end of the day, you got to find the right people. And if you're not finding the right people because of certifications, then change it, do something different.
Yeah, again, that's something that I pride myself on in where I work.
Yeah.
Yes, certifications can always help. They always get you, we don't really have an HR system that's going to yay or nay resumes. We look at them all. And we take into account, if you say you have X amount of years experience, if you say you've done this, that, and the third, 9 times out of 10, if you send us a resume for a job, we're at least going to call you and say, hey, and really get a feel for who you are and whether or not you're going to be a fit for the role in terms of your experience. Because we are looking for a lot of senior people, or at least level 3. And so when it comes to that, you have to have the experience in the field, in the industry, in doing what we're asking of you, because you're going to have to hit the ground running. That's not to say we're going to turn everybody away. Sometimes, eventually when, we go to hire a junior, a level 1 or a level 2 consultant, you might get a call. Hey, you still looking for a job? Because we feel you might be a fit with your current skill set. Again, it's not about your certifications. A lot of it is your network, who you know, and what you have stated If you have a YouTube channel, if you have a blog, if you have a LinkedIn profile that we can go through and look at and say, holy shit, this dude's on his fucking, he's on point, then we're going to take a look at you. But if you're anonymous, if you choose, you don't want to put any information out there, and we're supposed to take you at your word, and you have no degree, no certifications, nothing that sets you apart, it's going to be really hard to take a look at you.
Yeah, and I think that's key. And that is one thing. I kind of feel like I'm kind of a new to like the actual infosec community as a whole, at least on Twitter, as I'll put that. Um, and but I'm not new to communities on Twitter by any means. And so what I have noticed and being part of different communities in the past, again, early Twitter days to what it is now, the what I have seen in the InfoSec community is by far one of the most connected communities out there. And it's amazing, to be honest with you. It's phenomenal. Now, of course, you got people out there that are, you're always going to have people that are not that great, and they're going to be a-holes and not be, fit the community standard. But just like, for instance, the InfoSec bikini thing. I mean, that whole thing that just went down was the community standing up for a person, and that's
Hey, I put
phenomenal.
my picture up for InfoSec Bikini.
Yeah, I saw that.
I did
So,
it.
so I
but
almost
that
did.
that's the thing though. You said it. Yes, there's gonna be assholes. There's gonna be haters. Here's the difference, and people are probably gonna fry me for this. I will stand up for people that deserve to be stood up for, meaning they're not doing anything wrong. They're being themselves. They're being authentic, and they're not saying anything hateful. Right? Again, difference between hate speech and speech that you hate. If you have never heard that term before, there is. So if you just don't like what somebody says, that's one thing. But when people are being misogynistic, racist, or whatever, that's a whole different can of worms. And when you're judging people because, oh, you have InfoSec on your bio, but you're putting up bikini photos, I don't want to see this shit, then don't fucking look. Who the fuck cares? Like, a lot of these people are out there on their personal profiles. Personal profiles. Not company, not brand, not anything like that. It is a personal profile. And you're going to judge them because of what they put out. You damn straight, I'm going to come out the woodwork and I'm going to defend that. Because that is one of those things where how are you going to judge someone for how they live their life? And who they choose to be? It makes no sense. None at all.
Yeah, and it was, I always could tell that the community was that way, but that was recently when I really saw at least a tangible thing of how the community really does stand up for each other. And that says a lot about, one, we realize that we're kind of all in this together. I mean, the amount of information that's shared when an event goes down or something, you're trying to figure things out. I mean, that's what's required. And that is where I think this community shines. Even, what you do is phenomenal. It's great. And that's what it's going to take. I think it's going to take stuff like this. If the federal government or the regulators or the companies are not going to do what we think they should do, then the community at large needs to stand up and do what we're doing.
Yeah, and that's the damn truth. Like, I've always said, one of the biggest things me and my dad, I've said it before, my dad works in GRC. And it's funny because people get us mixed up all the time. They'll go to call him for like, hey, I talked to you. And they'll call me instead. And I'm like, we didn't talk. Yet we end up in the same resume system. So they find me and think it's him. It's always funny because if you look at the difference, we may look alike, but he's 5'7.5". I'm 6'3". I'm 34. He's in his 50s. I mean, but you look at it, and I told my dad, I'm like, look, you've got so many bright minds at Apple, at Google, at Microsoft. Now, far be it for me to agree with any of their privacy practices or the shit they do with data, but from a security standpoint and a coding standpoint, you have all these intelligent people. And you're telling me that collectively we cannot come to terms on developing something that may not be 100% secure, but has the ability to defend itself or monitor what the hell is going on? You're telling me that there are people out there smarter than you that people aren't willing to hire, is what you're telling me. And that bugs the shit out of me.
Yeah. And it's comes down to that shiny object. security is not always shiny. It's not always pretty. It's not the newest toy.
Well, think about it. Look at how long even in Linux, which is open source, which is one of the most, can be one of the most supportive communities, at the same time can be one of the most toxic communities, kind of like cybersecurity, right? InfoSec Twitter. But there are bugs that have been in Linux for years that are just now coming out the woodwork. Hey, this has been in here for, I think it was 7 or 8 years. It was a kernel bug or some other bug in Linux that gave privask like that, and nobody knew about it.
Yeah.
And I see things like this with open source software, and I'm like, it's been 7 years since this code has not changed in X amount of years, and you're telling me nobody found it. And it blows my mind. And again, we have a lot to learn. Nobody's perfect. People make mistakes. Shit happens. But I see things like that. I'm kind of like, somebody should have caught this in 7 years. They should have. But then I look at the shit Microsoft puts out, and within a month of a patch being delivered, hey, we've popped all these vulnerabilities from this new patch. Fuck, what you mean? Like, are you not QA-ing your shit? Have you not validated that the shit you're putting out doesn't, inject new vulnerabilities? Oh no, we fixed the old ones.
Yeah.
But you put a new buffer overflow in there that doesn't even require ASLR or anything like that. Okay, cool. Like, what the fuck?
And then you had the whole print nightmare scenario. Oh, we released a patch, and then all of a sudden that a proof of concept pops out, and then of course once it's there, it's there.
Did you read that article?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Where it was like, hey, we wrote a POC that was supposed to be for this CVE, was already out. They already patched it. We figured we were good to go. And then we realized that it was a completely different bug abusing the same service.
Yeah.
Like, fuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Son of a bitch. Dude, there's people that have already forked it. It's already out there. That shit's going to go wild.
And, I mean, print spoiler, the spoiler of all things. It's like, yeah.
It blows my mind. And again, I love this field. I think we're always going to have job security because of the bureaucracy, because of the red tape, I don't think we're ever going to be perfect at hiring people. I think there's always going to be something that's going to gatekeep. And that's just because people are scared to lose their jobs. Again, difference between bosses, managers, and leaders. One of the posters I keep on my wall, true leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. But so many people out there are afraid that someone's going to take over for them, that they hold them back, or find some way to get someone that will just follow along in their footsteps as opposed to standing above. Me personally, I like to see other people succeed. That's why I do this show. I like to see other people get out there and make a name for themselves. So I think we're always going to have issues. Anybody that wants to fix the system, you can fix as much as possible. People are going to be assholes. It's going to happen. Eric said, mine is train your replacement. That is very true, because if you want to get promoted, you better have someone damn well to be able to take your place, or you're never getting promoted. You better know one position up, 2 levels down. That's a military thing. You should be able to do your E6's job if you're an E5, and you should be able to do an E4 and E3's job. If you're an E6, you should be able to do an E7's job, and E5, E4. Just the way the job goes. Because if you're going to get promoted, you should know how to do the job you're going to get promoted into. And if you're not promoted yet, you should really be able to cover down for the people you're supposed to take care of. Just saying.
Yeah. So one thing, I'll tell you a story. I think this is interesting. Kind of fits into the some of the InfoSec stuff that's going on recently. Is so where I was when I was doing Apple repair. Obviously, I was kind of at the time I was the service manager, and so I was obviously over all the service that went on. I had the list of his certifications, and of course the staff did too, because Apple wouldn't let any technician touch it unless they had certain certifications. And so we had a couple of female technicians. Awesome. And they would go up to the front counter and they would be helping a customer. And you would have people that assumed that they were just there to help and they were not technicians. And it bugged me. And so the way I would usually handle it is this is one particular scenario where this man was at the front counter and said, I need to talk to a technician. She's like, well, I am. And so I hear it and I go up to the front counter and I'm like, yeah, sure, I can help you. And of course, now this is going to sound like I'm stepping in her place, but that's not what I was doing. And so, he starts asking me the question. And I said, well, actually, she's certified on it. I'm not. I think you need to ask her. And I walk back. And so, I mean, it's so ingrained, unfortunately, in that there's that perception, and it's so not true. And it will take people making those what seem like a bold move to her and just, standing up and saying, hey, look, she knows, I don't.
Look, I'm gonna say this, and then it's already after 8, so
yeah,
we're gonna end it. But I grew up in a household where you had the man took care of the outside yard, did all the woodworking, fix shit. That's just how I grew up. My mom, she worked. She was a nurse. She was an X-ray tech. Did a bunch of other shit. But she took care of the house, took care of the kids. That's what she did. So I grew up in a house like that. So for me, I always felt like I should be able to know how to use tools and fix shit, even though I get called mechanically inclined by my own family, or mechanically challenged rather. So I've always loved computers. My life's always been behind computers. Eric just said something. I'm gonna answer that question in a second, Eric. So I looked at it, and when I married my wife, she has always been very creative. And so she's always designed things and things like that. Well, when it comes to building things, my wife builds things. I do not. I've tried. When I was in the Army, I tried to build myself a little tool bench in my garage. I failed miserably. It was either too high or too low. Couldn't get the height right. It was kind of cockeyed. I can't cut straight for the life of me. I still can't cut straight. And yet my wife has me cut everything. And I'm like, babe, I can't cut straight for the life of me. She's like, it'll be fine. We'll figure it out. But she builds everything. My wife has built, if it comes in a box, she builds it. If it comes by, hey, you need to cut shit and I'm going to put it together, she builds it. I just cut it. I'm the gopher. I've always been the gopher. And yes, at times that has bothered me because of the way I was raised. Because I was raised to be the man of the house, to, make the money, take care of the family, take care of the house, be able to fix everything, be able to do everything. And so, yes, to this day, as much as I fight it, as much as I try to be like, hey, that's just the way it is, it has a tendency to bother me. And I won't lie. I won't. But I will always admit, my wife built the badass desk that I have. My wife painted this room. My wife painted all the other rooms. My wife helped me put these boards up. I cut them. She put them up. And then when I had Lowe's cut one, there's a reason this bookshelf is right here. It covers the fact that my wall doesn't sit center because my lines weren't straight. Lowe's were. The bricks didn't match up. All right. So my wife couldn't handle it. But I will always admit that my wife can do things that I can't. I always.
Yeah.
I get mad with her sometimes and she's like, I got it. I'm like, I just want to help. I got it. But I want to help. So it's one of those things, like even now, I started doing the yard. But she refuses to let me do anything by myself. So now she's out there working. My wife busts her ass every day.
Yeah.
I tell her to take a break. She doesn't listen. But for people to sit there and say women can't do things, I stand by the fact that there are so many women out there that are smarter than me. I pride myself on my knowledge, and I know damn well there are women that put me to shame. And last story to follow up on that, I played football as a kid. I loved football. Yet I knew when I met my match, I knew my limits. I was playing a pickup game one day. I got busted up my girlfriend at the time, she's pretty badass. But even I didn't fuck with her. We played pickup games of football. The moment she would grip me up, nope, put me down. We ain't playing that game. I'm out. My knees are all jacked up. I'm laying on this freaking track from, people. It was where we were. It was an asphalt track or whatever, or tar. I don't fucking know. Some rubber track. Still on my knees to this day. People want to run their mouths. I was like, I'd shut up if I were you. They didn't shut up. I said, I am warning you. They didn't shut up. She gripped up this big dude, and I'm telling you, this boy had to be at least $180, maybe 200 pounds. And this is when she couldn't have been more than 140. She gripped this dude up and dropped him. I was like, I warned you. I know when I'm beat. You apparently do not. But people are still live that life to this day. They don't give women the credit they deserve. And I don't care who you are. Like, there are women out there more intelligent than I will ever be. I strive to have the knowledge and the capability of some of these women that are out there. And I'm talking like Meryl Vernon, she who hacks on Twitter, Alyssa Miller, Lisa Forte. I can go through a slew of people that just blow me away every day with the knowledge that they have and the things they bring to the table. And the fact that to this day they're fighting for a seat at the table, fuck that. I'm going to take a page out of Davin Jackson's playbook and I put it in hashtags, said it before, we're going to build the fucking table for ourselves. This community will be inclusive. Any and all people that want to be included will be included. But the moment you run your mouth about somebody at this table, don't be shocked when you get a right hook. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
You'll get dropped. But saying that, look, Brad, it's been a pleasure having you on here. I love getting your insight, especially into the way the DoD things are going. CMMC. Me and you're going to have to touch base. I got to do some research on CMMC, and I'm hoping you can provide some insight on it. Just for my sake and things that I'm working on. But with that, look, if you haven't hit the like button yet, go ahead and hit that like button. Share this video, because as soon as I'm done, I do not drop any. I don't delete any of my live shows. They stay out there permanently. So go ahead, share the video, let people see it. Subscribe, hit the alarm bell so that you know. And down in the links, you're going to find contact information for Brad, so his Twitter handle and his LinkedIn. You're also going to find all the ways you can support CyberWarriorStudios, that being Patreon, buy me a coffee. I think my GoFundMe link is still down there if it's still active, as well as CashApp. It's all there. Look, everything I do for you guys. And I do for the community, but it's not free. It's not cheap. I mean, I've been providing for it, and I will continue to provide for it, but little help is always, I'm always grateful for it. So eventually, once we can get this craft room done for my wife, she will go back, and we will be making hoodies, t-shirts, hats, and everything else like that. And I will get a new shop up and running as soon as possible. It's just going to take a little bit of time to get the work done now that we've moved. So in order for that to happen, though, we got to have an income coming in beyond just my full-time job that pays for my mortgage and all my other bills, including this show. So, hey, look, it's been fun. It's been a blast. You guys take care. Have a great 4th of July weekend, all right? Be safe. When you're setting off fireworks, please don't do nothing stupid. And if you have drank too much, do not touch fireworks. If you're going to go to the range, if you're going to be shooting guns out in the acreage somewhere, please don't do it while under the influence. But still, have a great weekend. Enjoy your food. And remember, it's Independence Day coming up. So celebrate your independence, celebrate your freedom. And everybody else, take care. Have a good one. I love you.